This is The Chris Heasley Show, coming to you from Radio DeBang, the North America's premier broadcasting network.
Hello. When Hugo Chavez seized control of the country of Venezuela, the first move he made was to seize control of the country's elections. His goal was to render the voter useless. His goal was to end the ability for Venezuelans to have the right for self-determination. So what Hugo Chavez did was he attached an apparatus to each and every elected official that allowed Hugo Chavez to approve or deny each and every elected official. And in doing so, once elected, then those elected officials were no longer beholden to the people of Venezuela, but rather they were beholden to Hugo Chavez. Leftists always move to control elections. They do it over and over again. In 2022, in the U.S. midterm elections, George Soros, a Hungarian financier, invested $125 million in U.S. elections. $125 million. He was solely the greatest investor in U.S. elections in American history. His entire goal was to transform the electoral process in America from end to end, to change the way that Americans can decide on their elections. A foreigner, an outsider, a Hungarian financier is now dictating to Americans how they will elect their officials. And again, Soros, just like Chavez, is attaining control of the elections of a sovereign country. And in that process, what he did is he invested $139,000 in the Fort Bend County District Attorney's race, Brian Middleton's race. $139,000 is what George Soros put in Brian Middleton's campaign. That represented nearly 40% of Brian Middleton's campaign to become elected to become the district attorney of Fort Bend County. George Soros is Brian Middleton's financier. It is safe to say Middleton could not win that election without that big chunk of change. And what was the first thing that Brian Middleton did once elected district attorney? He conceived the idea of the voter election task force, just like Chavez put an apparatus on the elections, just like Soros moved to transform elections in America at the local level. Brian Middleton moved in the same way as the leftist that he is and moved to control county elections. And what he did was, with this elections task force, he essentially put himself in a bird's eye view over the elections, where he would have considerable influence over that elections, where he and his officers would be watching you as you go in to cast your vote. Now, Brian Middleton, when he was elected into office, he aggressively hired and fired in that district attorney's office to transform it in a very aggressive manner. And he did it with the idea of finding people that were like-minded. So that means that once his election task force was in place, when you would go vote, you would have one of Brian Middleton's officers looking over your shoulder as you cast your vote. This whole fraud was built on the idea of election intimidation. Election intimidation. Supposedly, Fort Bend County at that time had a problem with election intimidation, where conservatives would show up to county elections and intimidate voters. So we needed the heroic Democrats to stand in their way and defend the little guy, defend the voter. That's the story they were selling you. Now, Fort Bend County's been in existence for hundreds of years, and never before was election intimidation an issue. Only once the Democrats seized control of the of the county did all of a sudden the race card get pulled out and election intimidation is now the driving issue in Fort Bend County. Thus, we need Brian Middleton's officers to be watching over us while we cast our vote. I want you to think about that again. We have an elections administrator that is in charge that we elect to control elections. But your county district attorney made a move to have his men watching you while you vote. So the question is, was Brian Middleton making a campaign to render the voter useless? Was he making an effort in Hugo Chavez fashion, like the leftist that he is, in George Soros fashion, was he attempting to influence the self-determination of Fort Bend County? Was he attempting to remove that ability of the citizens of Fort Bend County, that right for them to have self-determination? That's a question for you to decide. And this is the Chris Heasley Show. And on today's show, we have, for the longest time, because Soros would drop so much cash into that election for Middleton, nobody would go up against him. But today we do. Today we have attorney Shawn McDonald, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. And Shawn, you've announced your campaign for county district attorney, correct?
That's correct.
Great. Well, Shawn, it's good to meet you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And
Appreciate
thank you
the
for being
time.
on the show.
Yes, sir.
So tell us about yourself.
I've been practicing in Fort Bend County for almost 25 years now. I've been an attorney since the summer of 2001. Grew up just north of here in the Woodlands. Played some collegiate football and volleyball. Went to law school in San Antonio and ended up going to East Texas where they put me in a felony court as my first job as a prosecutor. And I was in front of a judge who wanted to try cases. So we tried a lot of cases in almost 4 years. I then transferred to the Fort Bend County District Attorney's Office, and I was there for almost 3 years. And then in 2006, I opened my own defense firm, and I've been practicing criminal defense since then. I've been a municipal court judge in the city of Sugar Land for right at 5 years. I just had to resign because I can't run and be a judge at the same time. And then I've taught law school at Thurgood Marshall in the criminal law clinic, and I was a government professor at Houston, now Christian University. So Fort Bend County is my home. We've lived out here since 2015, and I'm raising my family out here, and I have a wonderful wife and 12-year-old daughter who's a gymnast and absolutely loves it.
Very good. Excellent.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your work as a defense attorney.
I think we can all agree we don't want the government to go unchecked. And it's, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's difficult because a lot of times you're on the wrong side of things. And I think all defense attorneys struggle with that a bit. But in the end, you have to have all those checks and balances because if you don't, then the government going unchecked can get very, very scary very, very quickly. I enjoy what I do. I think I have a very dramatic impact on my clients because I'm not just their attorney. I try to guide them and help them in any way I can to get back on the right track. And a lot of times they haven't had a mentor or anybody who really has taken an interest in their well-being. So I try to treat them as somebody who deserves a second chance and guide them the best I can. I was really fortunate. I grew up with a wonderful family who supported me and gave me, frankly, everything that I ever wanted. And, doing what I do now and representing, a lot of defendants who can't afford good attorneys. And fortunately, my firm is big enough that we have the resources that we can provide them with a really good defense. And part of that is a way of me giving back. Because a lot of these kids don't have the childhood that I had. So it makes me sleep a little better at night knowing I can give back a little bit.
So why are you making this move to run for district attorney?
I love Fort Bend County. I'm in court 4 or 5 days a week, and some of those prosecutors in that office are some of my closest friends. I know them professionally. I know them personally. I spend time with them outside of the courthouse. And I don't like where the DA's office is going, frankly. Brian Middleton's not in the courthouse. I've seen him, I can count on one hand in 7 years, walking the halls of the courthouse, being in court with his prosecutors, checking on his prosecutors, helping his prosecutors when they're short-staffed. I mean, there's been some prosecutors that have been in a court by themselves for 6 or 8 or 9 months, and nobody comes in there and sits with them to help them with these dockets. There's supposed to be 2 prosecutors. You never see them in there helping prosecutors. You don't see them in the judge's office asking, what can we do better? Or are we, lacking in prosecuting offenses? What can we do for you? He's just not a presence. And I think the DA's office and the prosecutors in the office deserve better. I think they need a leader who will lead from the front, who will be by their side, who will check on them in court, who will be in front of the judges, whether the Republicans or Democrats, be in front of all the other elected officials, finding out what we can do better. I'm smart enough to know, and I'm self-aware enough to know that I don't have all the answers. And there's a lot of really talented and smart people in that courthouse and judges who can offer a lot for public safety, and that's my priority. And I will lean on anybody and everybody that can give me guidance and help in keeping this community safe. I'm raising my family here, and there's nothing more important to me than that having the ability to go out at night and go to the store and not be in fear, that's important to me. I just don't like the direction it's going. We'll talk a lot about that with the KP George situation and the text messages on the Signal app. It's just not a good look for Fort Bend County. And it's, every time I mention Fort Bend County to somebody, the first thing they talk about is all the scandals that's happening in Fort Bend County. And we went for decades without scandal. And now all of a sudden, we have Democrat official after Democrat official being investigated and or indicted for criminal offenses. And it's heartbreaking to me. It's not the Fort Bend County I know.
Let's get into that, but let's first just ask, tell me about the state of crime and safety in Fort Bend County. How do you feel? Do you feel Fort Bend County is getting safer, or tell me what you think of that?
I think law enforcement drives safety in Fort Bend County. They're on the front line. They're the most important people that is going to keep us safe. But the DA's office has to do their job as well. They have to support law enforcement, and they have to prosecute the cases that law enforcement brings them. And that's where I'm seeing the problem, and where all of my concern is coming from is the law enforcement is risking their life and putting their lives on the line to protect us, and they're submitting cases to the DA's office, and the DA's office is giving them away. They're putting them in all these diversion courts, giving them pretrial diversions, and in a year, these cases get dismissed and get expunged from the records. So we have hundreds, and I would venture to say maybe even thousands of defendants who've been charged with a crime who get a slap on the wrist and their case gets dismissed and it gets expunged from the record. So in 2 years, if they beat their girlfriend up again, like they did in Fort Bend County and they got a pretrial diversion, no one will ever know about it because they've had it expunged from the record because the DA's office and Brian Middleton's policies are giving these cases away. There's no accountability anymore. And I just recently went on a trip to Japan to see my brother-in-law who's retired from the Marine Corps. Japan is, I think, the safest place in the world. And it kind of struck me that you could literally leave your wallet sitting on a table for days and no one touches it. And I struggle with how is that even possible? And it's because they're intolerant of crime. Everybody there is intolerant of crime. Fort Bend County is heading the exact opposite direction. What's going around and what the criminals are talking about is let's come to Fort Bend County because whatever you do, you're going to get a slap on the wrist and we're going to erase it from your record. I mean, now it's you go in and steal from Walmart and you have to stay out of trouble for 90 days and they will dismiss your case and erase it from your record. And you can continue to steal year after year after year and your case will continue to get expunged because other jurisdictions don't know about it because they erased your record. That's not the message you want to be sending to criminals about Fort Bend County, is it's just going to be a slap on the wrist. They're not going to hold you accountable. You're going to have a low bail. You're going to get out on a PR bond. There's no prosecutor's going to be in court fighting to keep you in jail. And you're going to be in and out in a day, and you're going to stay out of trouble for 6 months or 9 months, and the case is going to get erased. That's not the message we need to send. It's just not. And as much as I struggle with it because I'm on that side of it, and as much as it does help my clients, it's not the answer.
I want to take a quick minute and give a shout out to our featured product, which is the LifeWave X39 patch. The LifeWave X39 patch, which you can see right here on my bicep. And this company, LifeWave X39, is the fastest growing company in the world for the second year in a row. And it's an incredible company. The reason that it's growing so fast is because of the technology that it produces, which is stem cell regeneration. Stem cells are what heal your body. Everyone has stem cells. And of course, you've heard about people getting stem cell injections. Instead, the stem cell injection is a very, it's a gross process where they pull stem cells from aborted fetuses. aborted babies. That is not this. This is regenerating your existing stem cells. But the reason that they do that is because what your stem cells do is they bring your body back to life. They heal wounds. They allow the football player to get back on the football field sooner, the boxer to get back in the ring. They do stem cell injections for that to happen. What this patch does, it's photolight therapy. When they dropped the Wuhan flu on us, President Trump said, put light on it. What this is that light. This light redirects, your body emits light, it redirects it back into your body. It's an amazing technology. Clinical trials have been done. And what it does is it heals your body. It turns the years back. As for myself, I've had two issues. Number one, I have energy drops. I have to take power naps. I sometimes get sleepy behind the wheel. That does not happen to me anymore. I no longer need caffeine because of the X39 patch. I wake up at 5 a.m., roll out of bed, sharp as a tack. I no longer have fog brain. My life before the X39 patch was a prison sentence. I am now free. In addition to that, wives out there, I'm sure you hear your husbands having to go pee at night, right? Because the pressure goes on our bladder. It forces us to have to go to the bathroom all the time. This X39 patch has relieved that pressure for me. One more prison sentence that is over. It's incredible. Maria in Fort Worth fell in the shower for 10 years. She had excessive headaches. She puts the X39 patch, and in a day, these massive headaches go away. David in Dallas had patches begin to form in his eyes. He was losing his eyesight. He takes the X39 patch, and his eyesight heals. He's an ex-football player. His knees heal. I can go on and on. It's the X39 patch. I have a friend who's a PTSD war veteran. He has to take excessive medicines at night to sleep. No longer with the X39 patch. So this patch will have a reformative effect on your body. It's the X39 patch. And to receive a sleeve of 30 of these, it's $100. That's 1 month's supply. And in order to get those, text the word Patriot to 330-606-2304, and the link will be sent to you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we were talking about, you're saying that cases are not being prosecuted in Fort Bend. Is that essentially what you were saying?
Where the concern for me comes from is it's well documented that Brian Middleton accepted a ton of money from George Soros. George Soros has funded DA's office races throughout the country, depending on who you ask, 40 or 50 different progressive prosecutors. And with that money comes expectations. And we can't be running social experiments and having to answer to New York billionaires about public safety and public policy. But when you're taking, you mentioned $130,000 or $40,000. I think it's upwards of $800,000 that George Soros has given to Brian Middleton.
So I want to say this. We had a debate earlier in the show. How much money did Soros actually give to Brian Middleton? My number is $139,000. But Shawn, you're telling me that the number is much higher than that.
The documents you have is directly from George Soros for $139,000. His name is on his campaign finance reports. 3 days before that, I'm showing a $629,000 donation to Brian Middleton from a PAC that George Soros is tied to.
So we have to understand how far the left is going to infest our local governments. George Soros has put, it appears to be, potentially $1 million, almost $1 million in Fort Bend County's elections. Now, I want to make this clear. It's not Harris County, which is 6 times larger than Fort Bend. It's small town Fort Bend that this European billionaire is dropping cash to render the Fort Bend County resident useless. Your vote is now negated by the fat cash of George Soros. So the question becomes, who is Brian Middleton beholden to? Is he beholden to you and your little tiny vote? Or is he beholden to the fat check, the fat cash of George Soros dropping nearly $1 million into his account?
Well, Soros' expectations and well-documented expectations is we're going to create these diversion programs. We are going to go after law enforcement. And you see that with the public integrity unit at the DA's office. I don't know how many law enforcement officers I've talked to who are terrified that they may unfortunately make what the DA's office thinks is a mistake, and the Public Integrity Unit is going to come after them. I've heard them express concerns about the DA's office acting like they're a law enforcement agency now. They are sending out investigators to investigate crimes.
If I may say, the Public Integrity Unit, it was the incident in Minnesota. What was the man who was beaten by police and killed? George Floyd.
Yes.
So George Floyd happened up in Minnesota, and Brian Middleton initiated, as I understand it, what is it called again, Shawn?
The Public Integrity Unit.
The Public Integrity Unit. So I want you to think about this from our officers' perspective. The Public Integrity Unit was first started for the purpose of policing our own police based on a leftist agenda, okay? Based on the premise that our police are inherently racist. So I just want you to under Brian Middleton's premise, under his gut instinct, our cops are guilty before they're innocent. He is essentially saying, yeah, I know you're racist at least a little bit, so I got to watch you. That's the message being sent to our police officers in Fort Bend County. How can they do that job when that negative connotation is being placed over their head? What's the morale of our police officers when that negative connotation's being placed over their head? Should our police officers be freed from this accusation, this subtle accusation that's coming from the district attorney's office? You decide. What do you think, Shawn?
I mean, we see the evidence. I think let's say it's 40 George Soros funded progressive.
No, I answer. Go ahead, say what you want. I want to hear what you want to say, but also I want to know about that Public Integrity Unit. What you're saying about it?
Well, I mean, from my standpoint, it's an intimidation unit.
Okay, go ahead. Tell me.
It's an intimidation unit.
Uh-huh.
And law enforcement needs someone that's going to stand behind them. And creating a Public Integrity Unit, I think, to intimidate law enforcement. And trust me, I've heard. This isn't my word.
You want water? Yeah.
Law enforcement's concerned. And the DA's office seems to want to take, under Brian Middleton, a more proactive approach to investigating crimes and being law enforcement. Instead of that checks and balances that I think is imperative, that you need to check law enforcement's work. You can't be doing the work yourself and then prosecuting it.
Okay, but just look at his entire agenda. He is socially re-engineering our entire county government. The county government has been laid in stone by the founders of Fort Bend County. We don't need Brian Middleton to be creating this apparatus and that apparatus on the county government that meets his political ideology. Go look at Brian Middleton's career. He starts his career as a race baiter. You just go YouTube him. The videos are out there. You know, his entire premise is that, yeah, America, you're racist just a little bit, and Brian Middleton's going to be the one that decides whether you're guilty or innocent of that racism. Brian Middleton puts himself in the perched position to judge you. How condescending is that? How arrogant is that? He doesn't care about the voter because he's getting $1 million from George Soros, so he gets it. Then he takes the high seat and he looks down, drops his nose down looking at you because you're the peasant, you're the racist. Why does he doesn't need to answer to you. He's got Soros bringing the cash in. So he's going to create the elections task force to watch you, not to watch Soros. No, we're not going to talk about him. We won't mention his name. Brian Middleton doesn't mention his name. He talks about you, though. We're going to create the election task force to make sure you don't intimidate the voters. You're the problem, Fort Bend County. Now we're going to create the Public Integrity Unit to make those police be honest. Brian Middleton always in the perched position, drawing opinions on you, judging you. Arrogance, leftism, same old. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mean, we can see the evidence. I think, let's call it 40 Soros-funded DAs who've been elected. 21 of those got voted out of office. Several of those got removed by the voters because of their soft-on-crime policies and the devastating impacts it had on their communities. And we're seeing it. And it's the same exact Soros-funded political ideology that is tried and true in all these other communities that failed. Low bonds, war on law enforcement, be nicer to the criminal, diversion programs, don't enhance, low-level drug offenses we're not going to prosecute, Drugs in schools, we're not going to prosecute. We're going to give them diversion programs. It's the same exact political ideologies and political agenda that's been tried countless times throughout this country. And the citizens of that county have voted out half of these progressive DAs who've been elected because they see what happens.
I think Brian Middleton, he sort of gets a pass because he's right next to Harris County, which is absolute toxicity, right? The bail bonds, the bail bond issues that they have there. So the truth is that Harris County, unfortunately, is already spoiled. It's a spoiled sandwich. So we're all trying to save that spoiled sandwich and bring it back to life. Fort Bend County is still livable. It's still decent, but Brian Middleton is in the process of spoiling that sandwich. So because the sandwich isn't spoiled yet, Brian Middleton gets a pass because we're always looking over at Harris County. We should be looking at Fort Bend County. It's the spoiled sandwich that's in the incubator. He's cooking it a little bit longer, until it's fully spoiled. That's I think he gets a pass because he's next to Harris, but keep talking.
And the best example I can give you on what these policies have done to this county is our misdemeanor court judges trying DWIs, family violence cases where men are assaulting their wives or girlfriends or vice versa, theft cases. Prosecutors used to try 2 or 3 cases a month. I know of one judge in Fort Bend County that went 2.5 years without a single trial. They would try dozens of cases a month in that courthouse, in misdemeanor courts. And I could probably count on one hand the number of trials they've had in the last 60 days because they're giving away and giving the vast majority of defendants these pretrial diversions. They're not going to go to trial and they're not being held accountable. So now the impact of that is you have misdemeanor prosecutors who are in misdemeanor court to cut their teeth, to learn how to try cases. Because you move up to felonies, you're going to be trying some really horrific crimes and some really bad guys that need to be put away. But you're coming up to felony division without any trial experience because Brian Middleton is giving away all the misdemeanors that used to get tried that these prosecutors could cut their teeth. So now they're coming up trying murders, sexual assaults.
And they don't know what they're doing.
I don't want to say they don't know what they're doing. There's some very talented prosecutors.
They're not ready for that level of work.
They're not. And it's not fair to them. It's not fair to them. And they're being put in that position. I just tried a case against a prosecutor who I am extremely fond of. And it was his first felony trial. And he did a wonderful job. But I'm like, how many cases did you try as a misdemeanor prosecutor? And I think he told me 2 or 3. And I'm like, how is this happening that these prosecutors, they're not prosecutors anymore. They're signing contracts with the DA's office, get them to defendants and giving these cases away.
So basically, the way a prosecutor's office should work is that you try all the misdemeanors. You have your junior varsity guys, your beginners, go do those more, less complicated cases. And then once they have a good experience under their belt of doing misdemeanor cases, then you elevate them to felony cases. And that is not happening, is what you're saying.
No, they're never getting on the field. They're never given the opportunity.
Because misdemeanor cases aren't being heard.
No, they're giving away DWI cases, diversion. Theft cases, diversion. Assault, family violence, diversion.
Okay, I had a Sugar Land cop tell me that the Sugar Land police are no longer arresting anyone for DWI because if you arrest someone for DWI, you have to spend a day. It's a day of doing the paperwork, and then you hand it over to the DA's office, and Brian Middleton's tearing it up. He won't prosecute it. So basically, drunk driving is basically, it's lawless right now in Fort Bend County. That you could drive drunk and there's little to no consequence. Is that true?
I haven't heard that, but I know that I hear from law enforcement that they spend the time to make these DWI arrests, which are 2 or 3 hours to get an arrest, get them to do a warrant. And then in 3 months, this person's on a pretrial diversion. 9 months after that or 12 months after that, their case is dismissed and expunged from the record. So in 18 months, it's like it never happened, and the officer has essentially wasted all of their time because it's never, ever going to follow this defendant.
Okay. So what is a pretrial diversion?
It is a contract. Normally, let me give you some context. You get arrested, you go to court, you plea your case. You placed on a deferred adjudication probation through the court system, through the judge. You plead guilty. You're on a probation through the court system. You're being held accountable by a judge who's elected in Fort Bend County. Pretrial diversion takes the judges out of it. The judges have no control anymore of these defendants. These defendants are signing a contract with the district attorney's office and paying them $400
It's like
to enter into this contract. And this defendant will, a theft case, stay out of trouble for 90 days. Then the DA's office will dismiss it like it never ever happened. The judge has never been involved. They've never had to go to court. They've never had to stand in front of the judge. Case gets dismissed. They'll agree to an immediate expunction. And you see it with theft cases, with assault family violence cases, with DWIs. You name the misdemeanor, they're giving away pretrial diversions for $400 a pop every chance they get, to the detriment of the misdemeanor prosecutors, which ultimately is to the detriment of felony prosecutors because they don't have the trial experience to put the really bad guys that we want in prison away because they don't have the experience.
So we have an incredible set of laws in America that were built by men, some of the smartest men that created our country. And essentially what you see is that whole system just falling apart because someone assaults their wife, assaults their girlfriend, or assaults someone, whatever, and the DA's office stands in, stops it from going to trial. They do the pretrial diversion, which is essentially $400 down, 90 days probation is what it sounds like,
On
and
a
you're
theft,
out.
if it's on a assault family violence, sometimes it's 12, maybe 18 months, and it's a DA supervised probation. It's not a court supervised. Regular pleas typically involve the court. You're being held accountable by the judge. But these pretrial diversions, the judges have no say anymore. They have no control. The defendants never even go into their court anymore. So now the DA's office gets to do what they want and send them to the probation department, and they've completely taken the judge out of it. So and it's not just misdemeanors. There's assault, family violence, strangulation cases that they're putting on pretrial diversion.
The entire premise of Soros is to erode the foundations of our country. Middleton cannot win unless he gets that next check from Soros. And so there is no, like, when I hear this stuff, I think these men are evil geniuses. What they did, Soros wrote the agenda, sent it to Middleton, who was coached. I don't know this, but it certainly sounds like this is just too thorough to not be planned, to be a conspiracy. And they essentially write it down on a whiteboard. Okay, we will use pre-trial services because that will ensure that misdemeanors never get heard, and our district attorneys never get that essential training, that it never goes in front of the judges, and that element of our legal system is now eradicated. And essentially what you have is Brian Middleton now commandeering the entire legal process himself at the behest of George Soros. To me, it seems as if these evil geniuses wrote it down on a whiteboard. This is too slick business to not be thought through. This is brilliant.
Something else that I see as on the defense side is you have clients that are like, I'm not guilty of this. And I'm like, I understand. I said, but they're offering you a pretrial diversion. You don't have to admit your guilt, and you enter into this program and they can dismiss the case, which take that pretrial diversion out of the equation. My client says, I didn't do this. He goes to court and gets to fight. But when you're presented with an offer that's too good to turn down, like, look, you just stay out of trouble for 12 months, your case gets dismissed, it's going to be erased from your record like it never happened, or do you want to go to court and fight it? Even though you're innocent, I get that. So it gets very, very dangerous with protecting the rights of citizens because they're being given an offer that's too good to turn down. It's not worth the risk. And so there's no accountability anymore to forcing the state's hand. And so I don't have the ability to say, let's go to trial then. If you're going to accuse my client of something, then you need to prove it in court. And my client's like, I can't go to trial. They're offering me a pretrial diversion. I can't possibly pass that up. I want to take the pretrial diversion even though I didn't do this. And I don't have to admit guilt, right? No, you don't have to admit guilt. You just sign right here and you report to probation. You pay probation $60 a month. You pay the DA's office $400 to get in the program. You pay for drug testing, which is $15 a pop. And it's a money grab. So for a year, 18 months, or whatever it is, they put you on a pretrial diversion. All you're doing is paying the DA's office and the probation department. You're not paying the taxpayers. When you go to court and you're fined, that money goes to the taxpayers. That money goes to the court system, to the clerks. This isn't going to repay the taxpayers
he's
anymore.
Subverting every. I mean, this is brilliance. This This is evil. This is an evil genius.
And it's exactly what Soros told them they're going to do. And it's well documented.
Yeah.
You can go Google Soros and DA office policies. He's doing exactly what Soros told him to.
Soros said, I would rather fund, I'm paraphrasing. He essentially said, I would rather fund district attorneys than fund campaigns of state representatives because it is the state representatives that write the laws. And Soros thought about putting his money at the men who write the laws, but that is a harder, more arduous process. So Soros came up with the second idea. Wait a minute, I'll just fund the district attorneys and then I will tell them what laws to enforce and not to enforce. So essentially you have George Soros rendering our state assembly, our state House of Representatives, our state senatorial house useless. The whole state's being commandeered by a European financier, George Soros.
The intake division is a complete disaster. For some reason, Brian Middleton implemented a policy that they must watch every single video of every single case before they can accept it. And the chief of that division is wonderful. They work tirelessly to get through these cases. But to expect these prosecutors, because some of these, even at DWI, there's going to be 3 or 4 officers on scene. That's 3 or 4 officers, an hour video. That's 4 or 5 hours of an officer's videos that you have to watch to accept a single DWI case. And now we're seeing defendants arrested, either sitting in jail or bonding out and getting a low bond because now the DA's office knows it's going to take 6 months for a case to be sent through the system and accepted. Because if it's not accepted, you can't start the court process. So for 6 months, it just sits there. And it doesn't matter what the offense is. It could be felonies. You have victims waiting for justice because Brian Middleton thinks it's appropriate for every single video on every single case that's ever filed to be watched before he files the case. It's absurd. And it has delayed the system. And now all we do is take calls from clients, and the DA's office is taking calls from victims every single day asking, why is it taking so long? Justice delayed. It's a tragedy, and victims should expect swift justice in this county, and they're not getting it. These cases languish for 2 or 3 years. There's cases on intake that have succeeded a year that I've personally handled.
I mean, it's a tactic to render the legal system useless.
And you know what they're doing?
Yeah.
They're paying the probation department $40 every single month while they're on conditions of release. So imagine that. Thousands of defendants, you delay intake from 30 days to 6 months, you just made an extra 5 months worth of $40. You've made $200 a defendant just by delaying intake because they're on pretrial conditions of release. And now you've just stuffed your pockets with tens of thousands of dollars. And that's not the only thing they did. GPS monitors. They charge our clients $350 or roughly $320 a month for GPS put on their ankle to track their whereabouts. We couldn't understand why they wanted to do it on every single client. It was getting absurd. Defense attorneys will tell you, we were filing motion after motion like, this isn't a case for a GPS tracker. Well, we come to find out that the supplier of the GPS tracking devices was charging the county about $210. The county was upcharging, in violation of the code and the laws in the state of Texas, was upcharging our clients $150 and pocketing that money. For years, well over $1 million that this county was pocketing, the probation department was pocketing by overcharging us in violation of the statutes. And they changed it. And the judges, for a long time, quit even charging anything for our clients to do that. I don't think anybody will convince me that part of this isn't a money grab.
Well,
it's unfortunate.
I want to go back to one point that you made. They are essentially watering down the legal process. They're slowing it down by requiring the intake organization to watch all of these videos before they can hear a case. And that's a tactic to render the legal system useless. Soros is here to remove the foundations of our society, the great foundations that were put in by the men of Texas before us, because he's a European financier. He doesn't like Americans. He doesn't like Texans. So he's come with this insidious method to take out our society from within. And so what they do, they put all these incredibly bureaucratic processes in place to slow down the system so that cases don't get heard and the legal system becomes inept. It becomes benign. It becomes it no longer works, and lawlessness reigns.
It's to the detriment of victims in this county. And that's why I'm running, is Brian Middleton is more concerned with protecting defendants and making sure that they aren't held accountable and giving them all these diversion programs. Soros don't care about the victims. He's not out there. Have you ever heard him? Can you find any article about him talking about protecting victims and victims' rights and standing up for them? That's not what his policies and his political agendas, that's not the end game. That's why I've got to stand up. That's why I have to run. Someone needs to protect the victims and say enough's enough with protecting these defendants and giving these cases away. Someone stand up and protect these victims and make this community safer. Community safety shouldn't deal with political agendas. And that's where we're at, unfortunately. It's not fair that 2 or 3 years go by before you can see a courtroom as a victim.
I have a question for the audience, okay? Every elected official is beholden to report to the citizenry and no one else. That is law. That is a requirement. And if an elected official is reporting to a foreign adversary, to a foreign entity, if an elected official is an operative here acting on behalf to foreign interests, my question to the audience is that an act of treason? That's my question for the audience. Is it an act of treason to do what everything that's being described here in this show today? You know, because the crime is subtle, because the crime is behind the scenes, is it not still a crime? When you write down a conspiracy on a whiteboard, where you plan out how you're going to take down a county, a country, a government, is that not an act of treason? Does the RICO Criminal Conspiracy Act kick in at that point? When are Americans going to start standing up for law and order in this country? We're going to allow these elected officials to put their shiny smiles on the camera and just tell us that to be good citizens, and we're going to take that? I mean, this state of Texas was built by men of fortitude, and the baton has been passed to us, and we're being described right here on this show how these evil geniuses, the criminal class, is taking our county from within. Are the people of Fort Bend going to sit down? Go ahead, Sean.
We need some local control, and that's why I'm in this race. My agenda is with the people of Fort Bend County. That's where my loyalties lie. And that's why I'm in this race, because somehow we've gotten off track of that. And I see it every single day in the courthouse. I see it with the prosecutors. I see it with law enforcement. And it's just not the direction that I am comfortable standing by and watch happen.
Well, I appreciate someone stepping up. The big question is, nobody was stepped to Middleton because he's got the big Hungarian financier in his back pocket. One theory I heard is that the Republican Party didn't want to run against him because if they ran against him, Soros money would come into the campaign and it wouldn't go just to Middleton's campaign. He would disperse it to all Democrats. So the entire Democrat, all elected officials would be, ramped up with money, cashed up. But you have the courage to stand up to this guy. I mean, is it not a futile effort when you have Soros money behind him?
Well, we saw it in 2018 was a shock to everybody. The Democrats swept every single race in Fort Bend County. That's because of George Soros funneling $700,000 or $800,000 into this county and stole every single race that involves our criminal justice system in this county. And I'll tell you, in 2022, I got some pushback because I was considering a run for the same reasons I'm running now. I didn't like the way it was headed. And I got some pushback from some community leaders, some political leaders, some elected officials, that they were scared that George Soros money was going to come in again and they were going to sweep again, because we don't have that kind of money coming in from the conservative side. For a variety of reasons, I chose not to run in 2022. But I'll tell you, I met with as many community leaders and elected officials as I could possibly meet with over a 2-month period. And every single one of them was like, you've got to run. We're not afraid of that Soros money anymore. There is a difference now than it was in 2022. The energy in this party, these elected officials who are willing to now fight and stand up for what they see is going south with the district attorney's office and in the safety of this community and the criminal justice system. Not a single person gave me any pushback. Every one of them encouraged me and told me I have to run because a change needs to happen.
Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. These stories these insights that you have are not known in Fort Bend County. I think everybody's suspicious, but they don't understand the legal system as you're explaining it here today. And when I walk amongst Republicans, I think they're all afraid of Brian Middleton because all I ever hear from Republicans is he's a good man. He's going after KP George. I mean, how can you say that when we watch the show? I mean, Shawn's going through tactic after tactic after tactic where he is unraveling the foundations of our county, and our county Republicans are just like, well, he's a good guy. It's frustrating.
And I've known Brian for a long, long time. I've known him for, I guess, probably when I first started out here in 2016. I respect Brian. I think Brian has a good heart. There's a lot of good people that he's put in that office that are really good prosecutors. But his policies are not what's appropriate and what's Fort Bend County needs.
I'm going to say that if Soros came to me and said, hey, you run for whatever office and give me, first of all, if anyone even had the thoughts to do the stuff that he's doing, we'd be all locked up. But if Soros came to me and said, hey, I'll drop money on you and make your political career, I would say no, because I love my country first. So when a man takes that money and then takes action against law and order in Fort Bend County, I don't know. So we're not allowed to question his character at that point. I'm going to go ahead and just, I like people that are patriotic. I like people that are fighting for the country. I don't like the ones that are fighting against it. So I'm not going to sit here and say good things about anyone right now. Go ahead.
And we can see, I did some research on where this Soros money, what counties and what areas of the country it's going to with all these progressive prosecutors. And Chicago, Alameda County, California, Contra County, California, Philadelphia, LA, Austin, New York, Dallas County, Bexar County. All of those communities have crime problems. All of those communities are having public safety issues. Every one of those communities you can pull articles that talk about law enforcement not feeling supported and are tired of the progressive policies because it's not good for their community. Every single one of those jurisdictions. I did the research for 4 or 5 hours today to see what these policies and how what's the result of those policies. And it's every single one of them is law enforcement is publicly going after the district attorneys because they're not upholding the law and they're not supporting them. Every single one of these George Soros DAs that he put money into, it's the same complaint by the law enforcement agencies in that community, and the crime rate is through the roof.
I don't know how morale can be good in either the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office or the Fort Bend County District Attorney's Office. When those men in those offices, I know they're good men, and I know that they sought those careers for the purposes of law and order. And then when you have this new element that is this, I won't say progressive, I'll say it's commie Marxist. These commies come in and subvert our legal process. I got to think morale's hugely spoiled in these in the DA's office, in the sheriff's office.
We're going to pull some data, and I'm going to pull data from 2015 until 2025. I can count on probably 3 fingers the number of pretrial diversion cases I got when John Healy was in office for my time here since 2006. So let's call it 9 years. I can probably count on 3 fingers, and I'm not sure it's that many. I've had, since Brian Middleton took office in 2019, I bet you it's 100-fold the number of pretrial diversion cases and dismissals since he took office over when John Healy was here. And that's concerning, because that's the expectations of Soros, and that's exactly what Brian Middleton has done. And I'm going to pull the data. We're going to do open records request, and I'm going to show you the data. It's indisputable. You're going to see it in due time.
Yeah, I mean, you're really certainly opening our eyes. So this is incredible. I don't want to stop you. We have about 15 minutes left. I want to put the ball in your court. You tell me where you want to go with this conversation next. Do you want to go to the KP George incident, or where do you want to go next?
The KP George incident, it's ongoing. It could potentially be something I handle when I come into office. So really the only information I have is what I'm reading online in the filings. That's public record. Let me tell you what a few concerns I have with the KP George case. Is number one, the DA's office, Brian Middleton, his first assistant, shouldn't be talking to individuals about criminal cases on Signal, which is an app that destroys the messages after they're sent.
First, tell exactly what the accusation, or if there's actual evidence, tell me exactly what happened.
So, again, based on the filings that are from KP George's attorneys, that my understanding is what the DA's office turned over to them, there's messages between Terrell Patel, who has now since pled guilty to the fake Facebook post to make everyone believe that Fort Bend County is a racist county, therefore you must elect Democrats. He was prosecuted for that. Fortunately for us, he was recording conversations with Brian Middleton, and he was taking screenshots of text messages that is sent on this encrypted app that destroys the messages so they can't be preserved.
Which is called Signal.
Signal. He was taking screenshots of the messages he was having with Brian Middleton.
Now, the first question is, you're not, as a district attorney, you're not allowed to use an unapproved method of communicating. Is that correct?
You should never, ever communicate about a case on an app that doesn't preserve your communications. It's in violation of the discovery rules. It's Brady. They have to turn that information over.
Right. So that's why he's doing it, so that he doesn't have to turn the information over.
And I don't know context. I don't know dates. But all I know is he is messaging with Terrell Patel, who is a co-defendant of KP George's, who's now on probation, about how much he hates KP George and how he's going to knock him the F out when he sees him.
All right,
That's concerning, that you have an elected DA wanting to physically assault the sitting county judge, and now you're prosecuting him.
Right. Okay, first I want to jump back. You, as a district attorney, as any law enforcement official, you cannot be communicating about legal matters on unapproved devices.
Certainly not devices that destroy your messages so nobody can see them.
And part of the reason that someone would do it on a device that destroys the message is so that there's no evidence of your communications.
Correct.
So the courts can never call on that.
Correct.
So all of your communications regarding legal matters should be in tune with the law. And they should all be able to be pulled, I would assume, to some extent. They should be, I don't know. I'm trying to say that by using this Signal application, he's stepping outside of the legal manner in which to communicate on legal issues. Am I correct?
He shouldn't be messaging anybody on an app that destroys your messages about office, cases in the office, public policy involving the office, witnesses, defendants. In hindsight, you have the sitting district attorney who's messaging a co-defendant of KP George on an app that destroys the messages. And thankfully, Terrell Patel took pictures of him, or we would never know it.
Okay, now talk about what the messages said.
The most disturbing is how much he despises KP George, and how many, and this is probably the most concerning for me, is how many complaints and investigations his office has conducted that he's suppressed when KP George was a political ally.
Okay, first, keep that, because I want to talk, you brought 2 points up. First, he's saying he doesn't like KP George, and he's saying he wants to physically hurt him. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is my entire activism was largely started because of the administration of KP George. I have been probably his biggest opponent, his biggest critic that exists. I consider him a detriment to the county. And with that being said, all people deserve an honest application of the law, even the people that are people that you don't agree with. Because if we allow our emotions to dictate how the law is dispensed, is the law is applied, then what happens is the law becomes corrupt and it can be used against you in that same way if the other side gets the football, right? But in addition to that, it's just ethics. So even though I completely disagree with the KP George administration, I certainly want him to have a fair hearing under the law.
And I'm going to read the quote. This is, again, from the public filings. This is Patel's screenshot, I believe, of a text message on the Signal app. And Middleton says, he ought to appreciate what I've done instead of complaining about it. It's like, have you been in the newspapers? Does anybody other than you know about these investigations? So he's talking about KP George, that he should appreciate me. He should appreciate Brian Middleton because I've suppressed and I've buried these complaints and investigations because you're my political ally and now you're not anymore and you better watch it or I'm going to release this information. How many other investigations of other elected officials, Democrats in this county, has he suppressed? Because he's admitting it here. He did it.
Right. So in that text, he's saying, me and KP were buds at one time. And when that was happening, I wouldn't apply the law. I wouldn't prosecute KP for if there were any potential crimes. There's something to that effect is what he's asserting. And your question's right. I mean, is that the case? And if so, does he pick and choose who and how he wants to apply the law?
He certainly seems to admit it here.
According to political interests.
That's terrifying. That's terrifying.
Joseph Stalin-style politics in Fort Bend County. I mean, it's like, come on, the people of Fort Bend, they're taking our county from us.
We need a change. It's time. And, I decided to run when I started seeing all of this material that has been filed. And all I know is I can just read what the quotes are and the screenshots. I don't know who's telling the truth, the defense side, the prosecutors, but they are fighting like cats and dogs. But I can tell you when you're the sitting DA and you're talking about keeping investigations of the sitting county judge secret because he's your buddy, that's against everything I've ever stood for in my life.
I can just say that this interview is incredibly enlightening, eye-opening. I really appreciate you coming forward. So we have about 5 minutes left. Is there anything else you want to cover?
Public safety in the DA's office shouldn't be about politics. We all want the same thing. Whether you're a Democrat, you're an independent, you're Republican, all of us want the same thing. We want to be safe. We want our families to be safe. We don't want drunk drivers on the road. We don't want to be assaulted going to the store. We don't want to be robbed. We don't want to be shot. We all want the same thing. And sadly, it's become political. And that's unfortunate because people are going to vote party lines just to vote party lines and not really focus on what's really important.
Yeah, I mean, really the people that are most vulnerable to this are our smallest people, right? When a county becomes lawless, what does that mean? It means the people that are weak, the elderly, are the women of Fort Bend County coming to and from the grocery store. When predators know that the law is not being applied, they become opportunistic and they begin to prey on people.
They do. And word travels fast amongst criminals. And I was given this example the other day. There's towns throughout the nation that don't enforce sex offender registration. They just don't have the capacity or they choose not to enforce the law. And within a couple of months, you will have dozens of sex offenders move into those communities because they know no one's enforcing that law. You ask anybody about Montgomery County. You ask any one of my clients and they're going to say, we're not going to Montgomery County to commit any offenses. They hammer people out there. We're staying out of that county. That's not our reputation. Fort Bend County used to have that reputation. We don't have it anymore. And that's because of these progressive policies that Brian Middleton is beholden to because he took $700,000 or $800,000 from George Soros. And it's a policies that's failed across this country. And here we are in scandal after scandal after scandal with Brian Middleton admitting that he is suppressing investigations of the sitting county judge when he's a political ally. That's not the Fort Bend County I know. It's not the Fort Bend County I
Again, it was an incredible interview.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate
incredible. I can't say enough about it. You certainly, spelled out the issues in Fort Bend County.
That's information that I've acquired in almost 25 years walking the hollowed halls of that courthouse.
Well, thank you very much, Shawn.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you having me. This is a good conversation. Let's do it again.
All right. So, Shawn McDonald, running for the Fort Bend County District Attorney's Office. An incredible hour. I appreciate your time.
Yes, sir.
And this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. We will be back in 1 week with one more hot topic. Have a great week. Thank you very much.
This is The Chris Heasley Show, coming to you from Radio DeBang, the North America's premier broadcasting network.